Wonderful to be here this evening with Mr. Brett Anderson. I always think Mike's understands is a bit like being at the dentist, but I'm going to work with it. Brett, congratulations on this wonderful book.
Thank you.
It turns out that the lyrics of the early Suede singles, like Animal Nitrate, and their reference to council homes, it's all actually drawn from biography.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to disappoint people that thought it might be social tourism, but it wasn't.
There was
lots of other things.
There was social tourism later, but not for you. The life you evoke, your childhood and adolescence, we're quite used to hearing social history from the 1980s and the 70s. In places like the north or Scotland where there's poverty and there's people being left behind by the sort of Thatcherite settlement. We don't often hear about that from places like Haywards Heath in the south. And that, the idea was those were places that were going to get the feel-good factor of monetarism, and it was quite the opposite for you growing up. It was real poverty, and it was the sort of poverty that had aspects to it, like free school meals.
I think that's one of the points I was trying to make in the book, really, that my kind of upbringing was sort of... It left me with a feeling of never quite fitting in, because I was working class, but I wasn't from a kind of mining community, or I wasn't from a high-rise block in Hackney or something like that. It's a different kind of poverty, a kind of a poverty that's more like kind of off the radar. Sort of, not a kind of glamorous poverty in any way, just a sort of scruffy kind of existence. And I think that was one of the points I was trying to make, that it kind of like that sort of led into some of the music that I was making and the kind of identity that I was trying to establish for the band as well. The kind of outsider thing that I've kind of like dwelled upon quite a lot definitely came from that, I think.
And also, that drawing on that from Suede, there's sort of sense of kind of malevolence, and people, you talk about not feeling that you knew where you fitted in, but that atmosphere of people from between spaces, those people seem to populate the lyrics as well.
Yes, definitely, yeah. Kind of like, the sort of liminal world, I've always kind of been more comfortable sort of orbiting things and sitting between things rather than being in the middle of things. I felt that's my space, where I'm a bit more comfortable. So.
And was that a space you retreated to because you needed to retreat, or was that a space that you created for yourself as sort of somewhere to go?
I don't know. It's just where I felt natural, and like I said, a lot of it is it's just a sort of strange, undefinable sort of upbringing that I had. I think it just always led me to the outskirts of things.
Did you talk about people lighting quite big bonfires at the end of your estate, and there being trees and bushes, and there are some sort of green spaces in there?
Yeah, it was kind of on the edge of a wood.
Yeah,
it's a weird sort of series of contradictions. It wasn't even particularly sort of urban and bleak. It was just sort of like this kind of scruffy little council estate on the edge of some farmland kind of thing. So it's just this kind of dirty old corrugated iron fence and stuff like this, So it's this kind of weird, scruffy. You see it a lot in the countryside, And I've kind of it's something that I've kind of like been thinking about writing about as well. Kind of like trying to set an album in a similar sort of area.
And these places haven't really been around for too long, had they, when you were growing up? It's very much a sort of post-war space.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean the house that we moved into in 1967 when I was born. I see old photographs of it when I'm a baby, and it's kind of like it's kind of like chain link fences, but there's no undergrowth at all. It's kind of like this blank, barren kind of sort of areas of dirt with no trees growing or anything. So it all kind of grew up around afterwards. So it was all brand new in 1967.
And someone who I think seemed to struggle with fitting in this environment as well was your father, who you write about in great detail. I think all books written by men in their late 40s are essentially what I call dead dad books. And
Yes,
we all,
I'll agree with that.
we all reach an age where we think this needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
You deal with it very well, but there is rather a lot to deal with. Your father was fond of flags and militaria, but there doesn't seem to be anything particularly ironic about it.
Nothing ironic about it at all. It was all very, very, very serious. You know, it wasn't like that. He was a kind of a royalist, born in 1941, and still grew up within the sort of like the fading influence of the empire, and very much believed in the British Empire, and would kind of like sort of bang on about Spitfires and Winston Churchill. But you're absolutely right about the dead dad thing. It's an interesting dynamic, one of the main themes of the book for me is an exploration sort of myself through my father.
Yeah.
And as you get older, as one gets older, as a man, you kind of like notice your father coming out in yourself. And there's a phrase I use in the book about staring into the mirror and seeing your dad look back at you. And I think as you get older, that's something that gets stronger and stronger.
You also mention, the grain of one's voice changes as well, and you can hear yourself speaking in the same tone as your father. And that's something I've come across as well. Is it? What are we meant to do with that? Does it just happen to us?
That's a really good question. I think you just got to recognise it, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's all you can do. As soon as you start kind of fighting it, you're going to in some way fall into some trap, probably, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think it's just being aware of it, and that's another thing that that I kind of mentioned in the book about kind of like if left unchecked, then the kind of I'm aware that the kind of person I might become might very strongly parallel my father. And I tried to take the good things about him. There were kind of lots of amazing things about him, and I tried to reject the things that I don't think were so good. But there are lots of amazing things about my dad. He was unmaterialistic and very individual human being, and very kind of like very sensitive and creative as well.
And I've seen a lot of the self-confidence and self-belief you drew on for Sway, not just getting up on stage, but in terms of how you presented yourselves.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have come from sort of
No, that's another thing. He should have been a kind of, I don't know, he should have been a celebrity. He was an extraordinary character. He was much more interesting than me. He was kind of unbelievable. And he had a strange kind of hubris, kind of that. But it's that he always reminded me of famous people in the public eye have a weird duality where they're kind of simultaneously kind of shy and self-conscious, but at the same time kind of quite arrogant. It's that kind of weird mixture that he had.
And that patriotism, again, I think goes back to where you were. That's quite a south, a very English thing, that patriotism, isn't it? If you're a royalist, I think, this is a huge generalisation, but, the South Coast is a place where people were press ganged, and there's the Navy. And it does seem to be an area where royalism flourishes.
Yes. Yeah, possibly. I can't really answer that.
No.
I don't really know what it's like in the rest of the country.
You think that was within?
His sort of royalism didn't. He didn't. It's not like his royalism gave him any identity with anyone else, though. It's sort of like it kind of just sort of left him a little bit more of an oddball in a funny sort of way. It wasn't like he was kind of part of a sort of group of royalists.
You didn't have flag parties.
Actually, having said that, he did flirt with this group called the Sealed Knot.
Oh,
The Sealed, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Sealed Knot. But they're kind of like this sort of group that reenact sort of like Civil War battles. used to sort of dress up in it as a cavalier occasionally.
I think
So in a way he did.
he was borderline Rosicrucian. After you left home, you went first to Manchester, right?
That's right, yeah.
And you found that didn't last too long.
No, it didn't last. I had a very kind of quixotic kind of, my choice of university was very sort of like idealistic, I think. I thought, I love the music that was coming out of Manchester, and I felt that somehow, I used that as a kind of like almost like a beacon that drew me to the city. I didn't really kind of research anything beyond that, really. I thought the fact that I liked a couple of full records and Joy Division and things like that would mean that I liked living in Manchester. And I kind of did. I sort of, it was a bit of me that loved the city. It just didn't quite feel like home. I kind of like ended up in a kind of, in a sort of student enclave that I didn't particularly feel much warmth towards, and ended up leaving.
And did you go to Spike Island?
I didn't, no.
You didn't take it that far.
I didn't.
My referee Super Furry Animals went to Spike Island, but he was a student in Manchester. And he has a very funny story about trying to make sandwiches as he was going in, but they were confiscating everyone's food. A very sort of gruff story. But
right.
I thought the idea of you having been there when he was there would have been
I wasn't. Matt Osman was actually.
Oh, there you go.
He went,
Yeah.
some of us were, yeah.
Okay. And Matt was there in Manchester with you?
He was in LSE,
But
actually.
he went up.
Yeah, but he was often up and down on the train.
And then you really did settle in London then, after that?
Yeah, I kind of moved in with Matt in a place called Ridgemount Gardens in just by Goose Street, and then we moved into a place in Finsbury Park.
And you really evoke that late 80s, early 90s London as a place where there was still dead time, where you could spend the day going around the Circle Line for something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to inform Suede as well, that idea of time coming to a standstill, long afternoons.
Yeah, before anyone had phones, so lots of hours sitting around doing nothing, looking at the clock.
It's like something else.
Wondering why I was moving so slowly.
And the nadir of that kind of life is when you realise you've watched Neighbours twice every day.
That's the definition of when you realise that you've fallen off the edge of somewhere, hasn't it? Sitting watching Neighbours twice, which I did for about 3 years.
So that feeling of the first Neighbours finishing at 2, thinking if we can get
what are we
to
going to do
nightfall,
until 5:30?
when does it get dark? I think that's one.
When you start recording them, that's when you really go.
That's when the men in white coats. But that does seem to have had quite an effect, that kind of time. And you talk about your friends who you lived with, and they didn't go on to form bands, but they lived that life too. You had a friend at one point who commuted to work in a fish and chip shop.
Yeah, my best friend Alan, who's in the book quite a bit actually. He lived in a flat in Morehouse Road with me, and then we carried on living together. But he was, he still is. He's an amazing person, Alan. He sort of almost like lives his life like he's a bit of a Peter Pan sort of figure. He still thinks he's 25 and acts like it. But he works in a chip shop, and he still does. And those were my friends, and they carried on being my friends, even when Suede was successful. I didn't sort of suddenly start going to Tea with Elton John or anything.
Yes.
So I kind of quite like that. All my friends were just sort of people that I was always friends with. I sort of like, in a funny sort of way, I kind of, I felt that there was they represented something that wasn't sort of capricious. They represented a solidity.
But that, I think, from the outside, that certainly seems to be one of the things that characterise Suede as well. That you were drawing your songwriting from a group of people who lived in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of loyalty is something the band later on would engender in the people who like their music as well.
Yeah, it was a strange sort of world that we were kind of drawing, but yeah, that was definitely an element of it, that it was a strange kind of dance between kind of glamour, the glamour and the prosaic kind of thing, trying to sort of, I don't know, there's at some point between those two things.
And Justine comes into your life.
Yeah.
How long had you been in London before you met her?
Well, I suppose, well, I met her quite, not very long really. You know, I met her quite, when I started at UCL, within a few weeks, I suppose.
It seems like you discover, although Justine's from London, you sort of map out, without getting too Ian Sinclairish, but you kind of map out a London for each other.
Yeah.
Quite early on, and sort of, you know, imagine this place for yourselves. It seems very dreamy.
Yeah.
This world.
I probably sort of like, you know, I kind of probably sort of romanticise it a little bit, but that's sort of how I remember it. Whether those are actual memories or manufactured memories, who knows?
I think in your early 20s,
what's memory anyway? You know?
I think you're allowed to romanticise.
Why not? And, you know, it's. I'm fine with that. I don't kind of really care whether they're real memories or manufactured. I know they're real memories, but I'm not saying I can make stuff up. But I think when you're writing, you have to sort of present it in a certain way so that it's kind of readable. You have to kind of you have to be telling a story, don't you? As you know, it's like a song. You know, for me when I'm writing a song, and you know, a song needs a melody. It needs something to grasp, and in the same way, you use language that might be Arcadian, in order to sort of create a tone, you know? Well,
the tone is very... You definitely found your tone in this book, because the poise with which you write and the economy is there throughout. And,
thank you.
I think it's worth noting, you know, that Brett can actually write.
Surprise. I can do something where I can slap my palm with a microphone. Surprise. Who would have thought that?
But Justine has a very galvanising effect on you in terms of, and Matt, in that
yeah.
The band. You go from kind of you become less of a bedroom idea of what a band could be, and to sort of take a step forward together.
Yeah, I mean, me and Matt and Justine were very, very close for a long time, and we were sort of, you know, I sort of hinted it in the book, but we were a little unit, and Matt was always there with us, sort of thing, and it was a kind of lovely little period before we sort of started getting serious about the band, when we were just sort of mucking about, really, I suppose, you know. Just sort of dreaming and you know, plotting and planning sort of thing, but in a very sort of carefree way. So it was a lovely time.
And was it Bernard that kind of, you know, you say he answers a guitarist wanted ad and asks you how old you are?
Yes.
And then says you better get a move on.
Better go on with it, and yeah. I mean, you know, if we hadn't known Bernard, I wouldn't be sitting here, because no one would be interested in anything I've ever done, I'm sure. He was the sort of, you know, the kind of galvanising element that suddenly, you know, had all these grand ideas about the sort of band we wanted to be, and blah 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 blah, but they kind of meant absolutely nothing, because we were kind of, you know, useless. You know, play a few chords and I could sort of sing a few melodies, but so what? You know, there's millions of people that can do that. Bernard kind of, I think it was almost the shock of seeing Bernard play for the first time, and being exposed to like a proper musician for the first time. It was like, fucking hell. So that there are people that can really do this, you know, and seeing them in the flesh rather than just on the other side of a TV screen. And it was incredibly inspiring, you know, and it sort of challenged me, and it sort of made me realise that, okay, if I really want this, I'm going to have to catch up. I'm going to have to bridge this gap here. And even in the early days, Bernard was just, you know, an awe-inspiring musician. He kind of went on to to other levels beyond that as well. But very, very inspiring. And without him, yeah, we wouldn't be sitting here.
And as a Smiths fan, you must have, auditioned people who thought they could play the guitar but couldn't. But Werner's got a very different style to Johnny Marr, but he does have the same technical ability.
Yeah.
Did that sort of strike a chord? Did you think there's something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Bernard is always been a huge fan of Johnny's playing, and it's funny the whole sort of Smiths thing at that time. Smiths are one of those really interesting bands that they've almost kind of got bigger since they've split up, and their influence now is almost bigger than it was at the time.
They never played a bigger venue than Bristol.
No, it's a really strange thing, and people sort of weren't actually fans at the time. Might look back on it and sort of think that they were the size of an enormous band. They kind of weren't. They were a big cult band, and so referencing the Smiths in those days wasn't as de rigueur as it is now.
Sure.
And I think Bernard gravitated towards our advert because it mentioned the Smiths. Not that many adverts did at the time.
No, particularly not after the baggy moment.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that was, they were always a huge influence for me. I'm not going to kind of make any claims about it. And their writing dynamic was very influential on the way we went about writing this way. Bernard would present me with bits of music, and I kind of try and weld melodies onto it. And at first it was disastrous, and I gradually got better at it.
And were Matt and Justine as excited as you were?
No, I don't think so. I think it took a while. I think it was, no, not really. No, I think I don't really know what they were thinking privately, but I don't think. I think they just sort of went along with it for a bit. I'm not sure. You'd really have to actually ask Justine. There's got a few moments when she'd say, "Oh, that's really good," but as time drifted on, she became a little bit more critical, and that was one of the things that when she eventually left, it kind of cemented us somehow, because there was this querulous voice in the background that suddenly wasn't there, and it kind of gave us confidence somehow. It suddenly made sense.
There's an interesting anecdote in the book about a role Justine took on, which chimed with my own experience. I know two people who ended up being quite senior in the music industry, one of whom runs Sony now. And in the very early 90s, he was just stuck behind the reception desk of a major label, as was another friend of his who was doing the same for another record company. And they both rang each other one afternoon and said the same thing to each other, which was, "The most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life just came up to the counter and handed me a demo tape and left. Should I ring her?" They left a number on the tape. And that was Justine, who you decided between you should hawk your demo around the record company.
It sounds terribly serious, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. I remember that day, actually. I think she was dressed in a leather skirt. By this point, we were what should we do now? But when you're a young band, you sort of you have this sort of belief that what you're doing, we did, I don't know quite how it works for other people, but what you're doing is absolutely brilliant, and all you need is access to some tastemaker, and all of a sudden the world is going to open up for you. You don't get that you need years of struggle. You need to learn how to do what you're doing. You almost have this sense that it should just be offered to you. You don't quite know the importance of the journey yet, sort of thing.
No, and talking of the Smiths, there was a band who they supported, their second ever London gig, I think, called The Decorators, who Richard Boone, the Buzzcocks manager, put a record out by them, and it flopped and nothing really happened with them. And he said to them, "This is a terrible time to be a London band, they're from London." And the way you write about the Stone Roses and Happy Mondays is very prescient in terms of how guitar music in London just didn't really exist. It had really the locus of attention was all up north at that period. But as well as that, when we think about London at that time, and obviously Bristol's different, but to a degree, it's dance music and ecstasy culture, and London was all about shoom and acid house and all the rest of it at that time. But that seems to have not been part of your life at all.
Well, it was a little bit. We sort of dipped our toes in. We kind of like, we used to go clubbing a bit, but it was almost this sort of like a sort of gestural kind of sort of thing where we just sort of go clubbing just because that's what young people did.
Right.
So we thought, what do young people do? Oh, they go clubbing. Should we try it? So and then we sort of stood there and like, what do we do now? I don't even know I never really know what you're supposed to do in a club. I mean, it's like the kind of knocking a carnival. I mean, what are you doing? It's like walking around. A lot of people walking around saying, "Where's the thing?" I don't quite get it. Sorry, anyone knocking a carnival or clubbing. It's never been my sort of thing. I have to admit. So, it's just kind of looking for our thing,
Yeah.
But we used to take a lot of ecstasy and sort of sit around and go like this.
Listen to the intro. But what you did have to discover and explore was the sort of fairly grim reality of the entry-level London pub club.
Yeah.
Try and get a record deal circuit, and that was quite a miserable world to be in.
It really was, yeah. Yeah, very unforgiving is the word that I'd use to describe it. It was quite bleak. But again, like I said, it's a necessary part of the band's sort of education to go through those humiliations. And in lots of ways, our period of struggle was longer than most bands. I think we played for about 3 years before anyone was really interested. And that's quite a long time, I think. I think because, in a funny sort of way, because we were so shit, it actually ended up being a strength. Because we weren't even good enough to kind of be able to kind of like rip off other bands, like My Jealous God or the kind of like Suit Dragons or something like that.
Yeah.
We couldn't even rip them off. So what happened was we were just so rubbish that we just sort of just became ourselves. I think if we'd have been more competent as musicians, we would have sort of ripped off one of those bands and kind of got a small late deal and kind of became a sort of like, sucked into the baggy sort of slipstream or something like that maybe, but we didn't. And it kind of allowed us to sort of, become us, because that's the only music we could make.
No, I mean, you did arrive fully formed in a way that few bands had to that point, but you write with some almost degree of self-flagellation about that moment when, sure, a few people here, it will resonate with you as well, that moment where you finish playing to 4 people who've clapped.
4.
Then you kind of stand over there, then you come back on stage to take all your equipment down, and they've turned up the PA and absolutely no one's interested whatsoever.
But it's this sort of disparity between, because you're on stage, you're adopting a persona, whether you like it or not. It's the very fact that there's a stage is a sort of, it's about power differential between the audience and you. That's what it is. And you kind of, there's an arrogance to being on stage, as a self-belief, and this thing where you finish and you're the last chord and you storm off in this sort of like arrogant kind of strop, and then gingerly step pick up the amps. It's just tragic. So I'm glad I don't have to do that again.
So that moment, you write about that moment when actually for the first time you walked out on that small stage and there wasn't that.
The D shape, the D shape, yeah.
And you actually had people, you had an audience.
Yeah, that happens quite late, yeah. I mean, there's regularly more people on stage than in the audience. Regularly.
And this is for how long? For
30 years. We played to one person once. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? One person. ridiculous for a house? Or?
And was it nearly always in London you played?
Yeah, it was always London. Yeah, actually, a couple. Well, I think once. I think played Brighton or something like that. It wasn't until we actually started getting a bit of attention that we weren't really outside London. But yeah, it's just London. Yeah, mainly North London, South, or places like New Cross.
Yeah, you ended up playing that just as it started to get going. You talk about this, things never changed, but it was an NME kind of talent show.
Yeah, it's called the On For. It was like On For 92. It was like an institution in the early 90s.
So this was when they, at the start of the year, this is before they did their sort of Brat Awards and Brat Tours. It was like very, very scaled down version of that. That they put on a show with what they considered hot bands.
Yes.
And you played with bands who hadn't been slogging around for 3 years. There was one band, Adorable, on the lineup, who's, yeah.
Is there someone from Adorable here?
And the other band, if I remember, was, what are they called?
Fabulous?
Fabulous. No recognition, that's good.
It's like with Midway still as well.
Rock band. They were sort of husky doish.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're in the stiff competition there because Fabulous were managed by James Brown, who ended up founding Loaded, and another enemy, sort of Acid House Ted. And Adorable went on to be signed by Alan McGee, who was present that night.
He was, yeah.
So even when you're tipped to be the next hot thing, you've got license and agency from the NME to play their big crossover gig, it's the other bands that get the attention.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think even then, that was a real in-between time. I think it did get us some attention, but still, we didn't. It wasn't the big break that we kind of thought it would be. We thought it was going to be this sort of entry point into something. But I think still we were very much out of step. I don't think kind of like A&R men really sort of knew where to place us, and still we weren't. Even though we had lots of the songs that ended up on the debut album, we still, we were still kind of just standing there singing them like this. We weren't kind of singing like that. I still hadn't learned about the. It's interesting as a performer, you kind of like learn how important the complicity of the audience is, and I hadn't learned that, and I hadn't learned to in some ways manufacture that. We're just presenting our songs in a polite way, which isn't the way to do it.
But by the time you had an audience, you'd obviously grown so hungry for them, and you weren't going to let them go.
Yeah.
So you were going to make sure there was something there for them to respond to.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But by that point, it was incredibly exciting, and then it's almost like carried along by this tide of goodwill at some point. But we certainly weren't being carried along by a tide of goodwill.
Not even when you had.
At that point.
Not even when you had the Suede Christmas party.
Well, that was jolly. That was really jolly. Well, in front of our manager and his girlfriend. Yes.
Did you?